more minutes for all the participants to join. But in the meantime, please share with us your best excuses for not undertaking due diligence, and we'll see if we can deconstruct that during the presentations. So we'll start in 2 minutes. Okay, I think we can start. There's still people joining in, but it's about time to start. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Welcome. I see you have been already quite creative in the excuses for not doing due diligence, and that you have proposed in the chat. So welcome to this webinar. You were more than 160 to register, which is great. It's a good number, which demonstrates the large interest that there is for the topic and the need for concrete tools to help you with your due diligence process. A few rules to remind you, but this is certainly not your first webinar, so I'll be quick. You're all muted, but you may have an opportunity to speak during the speech session. There will be, if you have questions, please address them in the Q&A module and specify to whom your question is addressed and to which person your question is addressed. The session is recorded, and if you have technical issues, although if you're connected, I'm sure you don't have technical issues, but if you want to annoy my colleague Shipo Mbau, you have her address just there. So let's just jump into the topic. As you know, international externalities of a way of living and consuming are undeniable. We can see that all over the place. Human rights violation and environmental degradation in factories, in plantations, or at extraction sites are taking place in all value chains. But who is responsible for those? The complexity and the increasing number of intermediaries in the value chains has led to deresponsibilization. Your company may be contributing to these human rights and environmental risks, but you don't even know how and why. But change is ongoing. Most companies are now directly or indirectly affected and have no choice but to act for more sustainable value chains. Directly affected because there is legislation coming at the Belgian level and especially at the European level for now concerning larger enterprises, but it might evolve in also concerning smaller enterprises in the future. But the market also is expecting more and more from enterprise in terms of traceability and transparency in the value chain, and making sure that they tackle the risk for people and the planet. And indirectly, we see that more and more because there is a cascade effect related to the legislation. As larger companies start to implement the due diligence, they have to look further in the value chain, and this concerns small and medium-scale enterprises that are suddenly asked to provide guarantee for what happens in the value chain and to provide some documents. So it's important for everyone to understand what we're talking about and what is expected from you. So how can enterprise get information about what happens in the value chain? How much are they supposed to know? And what can they do about it? There are more and more tools that public authorities at the regional, national, European, and global levels are developing. They're also providing support for enterprise and organization in this process. We'll find out about some of those today. The shift with the support from the Belgian corporation is also supporting enterprises in undertaking their due diligence process through workshops, webinars, and events. And of course, there are also many tools available on the market. Some are for free, some are not. We'll find out about some of them today as well. So basically, there should be no more excuse for not at least starting a due diligence process. So today, I'm very glad to have a very rich panel of speakers around me to propose and present the different tools that exist or that are being developed. Starting with our Federal Minister for Climate, the Environment, Sustainable Development and the Green Deal, Zakia Katabi. She will explain a bit the measures that the Belgian government is taking to support enterprise in their due diligence process. Then the well-expected self-assessment tool and online manual for SMEs that has been developed in the last few months will be presented by Boris Verbrugge. I wonder sometimes if I still need to present him, but he's a researcher at the HIVA Institute from KU Leuven. Then we'll get some inspiration from abroad, from Silke de Jong from MVO Netherlands, who will present the CSR risk checker that has been developed and that is being reinforced as day by day in the Netherlands, and that is available for everyone, and some other activities that they are doing as well. Then we have Cécile Henrard from Fairtrade Belgium, who is going to introduce us to a new tool that is being developed by Fairtrade, the Human Rights Risk Map. And then we are also very honored to have Reinhard Juncker from the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Reinhard is going to present us the Team Europe initiative, which consists of joining force across Europe in putting together the tools, but also the supporting measures for enterprises to make sure that they are able to align with the legislation expectations. Then we'll have a Q&A session followed by a very brief pitch session. That's something we knew that we're trying, but we want to give the floor to you, the audience, to pitch in a very short time, either online, taking the micro, and pitch in 2 minutes a tool that or a supporting measures that your enterprise, your organization has been developing that can help other enterprises in their due diligence process. If you're facing challenges and that you really think that there is something, a tool or a measure that you would need to face that challenge and you want to share it, please share that either in the chat or we can also give you the floor. But now I'm very honored to give the floor to Minister Katabi. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to this online handbooks launch seminar to assist businesses with their due diligence. This manual has been created to provide information about each of your businesses and SMEs in particular. Why is a toolkit like this required? Firstly, it aims to get our businesses ready for future legislation. As you are aware, this subject has already been covered by legislation in France, Netherlands, and Germany. As a result, many of our businesses who operate in these countries are already required to abide by these rules. And as the existence of various state legislations results in diverse requirements in the European market and in fragmentation, the European Union has decided to look into a directive on the topic, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Specifically, this regulation will force businesses to respect the environment and human rights in their own operations and throughout their value chains by detecting, mitigating, and accounting for the negative effects on the environment and human rights. To put in place sufficient governance, management processes, and mechanisms to achieve this. The regulation tries to address a well-known issue. Across the value chain, mainly outside of Europe, several abuses occur, including forced labor, unsafe working conditions, child labor, etc. This is the rationale for the 2011 adoption by the UN Human Rights Council of its renowned Business and Human Rights Guidelines and the ongoing creation of a second Business and Human Rights National Action Plan in Belgium. Along the value chain, it is also known that up to 80–90% of the environmental impact caused by EU production, as well as 30–40% of greenhouse gas emissions, occurs outside of Europe. The EU directive will probably be adopted in the course of 2023, at the latest in 2024, and as a result, it will be applicable as of 2026. Large businesses will likely be the only ones subject to the regulation, but even so, they will be required to make sure that all of their business dealings adhere to social and environmental norms. As a result, the directive will have an indirect impact on any businesses that do business with them through what is known as a cascade effect. The goal of this manual is to get businesses ready for these upcoming demands. The purpose of this document is to help each corporation define its sphere of influence or the areas where it has the power to affect the actions of the organizations or parties it interacts with. Second, this toolkit is essential to preparing businesses to respond to global developments like conflicts, the effect of climate change, rises in the cost of energy or building materials, etc. We have become more aware of how reliant we are on our supply chains as a result of recent events like the conflict in Ukraine and the ship blockade of the Suez Canal. In this context, identifying this supply chain is an excellent way to increase the resilience of our businesses. It's also crucial, in my view, that our companies gain knowledge about the value chain and thus increase their room for maneuver to deal with natural or political events that could threaten their business. This handbook, therefore, also aims to help companies to be more resilient. Finally, I hope that businesses will become more aware of domestic alternatives to their international suppliers by examining their value chain. Reducing transportation is a necessary product of fostering local commerce. Additionally, the less distance a commodity travels, the less it contributes to pollution in general and global warming in particular. Additionally, sourcing locally greatly decreases reliance of unforeseen circumstances, as wars, disasters, changes in the world market. As a final note, I'd like to mention that in addition to this manual, I've also published 2 calls for projects to support learning networks in developing the concept of due diligence in particular industries. These calls for projects include policy recommendations as well as pilot projects targeted at specific companies in the industry. As they become accessible, the outcomes of some of these learning networks will be included in this manual. In conclusion, I hope you will find this toolkit helpful and encourage you to use it frequently so you may utilize it to improve your value chain and build resilience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was a great introduction to the new tool that we all want to discover now, and that Boris will tell us more about. And indeed, the ministry has done a lot with the different initiatives that we've started this past 3 years. And now I feel that Belgium is catching a bit up on its delay in due diligence work. So up to you, Boris.
Okay, thank you, Brieux. Thanks, Madam Minister, for the kind introduction also. Brieux, I think I do still need an introduction. There's quite a few names that I don't know yet. So I'm a research expert at the HIVA Research Institute, KU Leuven, and I do quite a lot of policy-oriented and practice-oriented research on everything that has to do with human rights in global value chains. So I have the pleasure to introduce to you a toolbox due diligence for SMEs between brackets. Why? Because I believe that if a large company would move through the toolbox, you already have quite something to move ahead with. So this toolbox was developed at the request of the Federal Institute for Sustainable Development, together with a range of partners, which are listed here below. Given that I'm the first speaker, I also have the pleasure or the honor of introducing a few concepts. I assume that most of you will be familiar with these concepts, so I won't spend too much time talking about this, but still I think it's important, for instance, to briefly explain what is meant with due diligence. So if you refer to the UN Guiding Principles, which are seen as the reference document internationally, in the domain of business and human rights, for instance, they mention that due diligence is an ongoing risk management process to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for how a company addresses its adverse human rights and environmental impacts. So in case you are indeed familiar with the concept, you might also have seen this figure, which was developed by the OECD, and which is probably most likely the most used figure for defining and for visualizing due diligence. So I won't go into detail here, also because I still believe that for quite a few companies, and especially SMEs, this is still quite an abstract way of thinking about due diligence. And what we try to do, one of the things that we try to do in the toolbox, is really come to the essence of due diligence and really stick to 3 core processes. And I will talk shortly about that later. Before doing that, another question, of course, is what are risks? I think we can define risks as potential negative impacts on human rights and or on the environment. Both, and that's an important one, in your own activities as well as across your value chain, both upstream, so everything that comes before your company, as well as everything that supposedly comes after your company. And the important thing here is that it's about risks for others, risks for human rights, risks for the environment, and not risks for your company, which for a lot of companies still requires a shift away from, let's say, the previous mentality. Also because even when we say that it's about risks for others, these risks for others increasingly become risks for companies themselves. As indeed the financial sector, the legislator, the market is paying increased attention to how companies engage with risks, of course, it becomes important to actually deal with these risks to prevent risks for your own company. So that's a very important insight, I would say. So why a toolbox? I mean, there's plenty of reasons. The most important one, I mean, the risks are obvious. The legislation is coming. It's already there in a few countries, as the minister has mentioned. It's on the table both in Belgium, the Netherlands, and at European level. In addition to legislation, there's expectations from society at large, from the market, especially in B2B relations, and the retail sector is particularly a driving force in due diligence requirements, and the financial sector. So both investors and banks are increasingly looking at how companies engage with risks. Due diligence also creates strategic opportunities for companies, commercial opportunities to get to know your value chain and build a more resilient value chain. And then lastly, and that's a very important one for today, is that there's currently a lack of operational guidance for companies, and especially, I would say, for small and medium-sized enterprises who lack the capacity and the leverage to really stick to, let's say, existing guidelines. So I'll elaborate just a bit on this last point. I'm not saying that there are no due diligence tools and guidelines, and I would say the most famous one is the OECD due diligence guidance. But often these guidelines and tools are very lengthy, full of jargon, implicitly or explicitly oriented towards large companies that again have the capacity and the leverage to actually make things happen. There is one exception to the rule, and that is, I can safely say that is the KMU Compass, which was developed by Adelphi at request of the German government, and perhaps my co-panelist will say something about this. I would say that the KMU Compass is a lot more operational, is a lot more to the point and practical than a lot of the other tools that exist. But still, if you look at it, the approach and the contents seem to be implicitly oriented towards companies that have a certain degree of capacity and have someone in charge of, let's say, CSR that is more or less familiar with the issues at hand. But at the same time, of course, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we decided to reach out to Adelphi, and together with Adelphi and two other partners, namely Static and the Shift, we worked on a new toolbox, or let's say a toolbox that incorporates the best of what is out there and tries to improve mainly, and I mean, there's a couple of guiding principles, mainly the accessibility for SMEs with an emphasis on the S. So the guiding principles when we developed the toolbox were: one, accessibility; two, the importance of awareness raising. So it's one thing to tell companies what or how they should do something. It's at least as important to tell them why they should be doing something. Another principle is less is more, which speaks for itself. I mean, we didn't want a very elaborate handbook. I mean, there's plenty of those. We really wanted something that focused on the essence. And the last one is familiarity. So we try to use as many examples and best practices as possible throughout the toolbox. So the actual toolbox looks like this. I mean, this is the home page. There's two major parts of the toolbox. So one is a self-assessment. The other one is an online manual. The toolbox is currently available in Dutch and in French, but I have high hopes that we will be able to develop an English version as well in the coming weeks or months. So if you look at part one, the self-assessment, the idea is not to measure your exposure, let's say, or the way in which the extent to which you're exposed to risks in your supply chain, because that would be very difficult, if not impossible, to integrate in a simple self-assessment. The idea is to assess the extent to which you as a company are exposed to certain expectations. Expectations, whether it's from the legislator, from the market, from the financial sector, and so forth. Secondly, the self-assessment wants to assess your maturity, so your readiness and your ability to confront these expectations. So these two things are basically, I mean, there are two parts of the self-assessment. So what is your exposure to requirements and expectations? What is your maturity to deal with these expectations? So, I mean, as things go in a self-assessment, we have a series of questions, but I dare say that we have quite a few non-obvious questions. So usually questions would be aimed at probing into your policies and looking at the extent to which you already engage with certain initiatives or certification schemes. I mean, we really want non-obvious questions that trigger companies to reflect about how they face certain risks and how they can deal with those risks. So the first part, for instance, the question whether or not you ever have to, usually the question is, do you have a supplier code? Here the question becomes, do you ever have to sign supplier codes for other companies? For instance, also where we look at the maturity of your company, one thing we do is we give very short case studies and we ask companies to identify the best and the worst possible reaction. And then we will verify the response based on what international norms and guidelines have to say. So at the end, of course, you receive a result which gives a summary of the expectations as well as your ability to deal with these expectations, and a short explanation for each of the questions. Of course, whether or not you read the entire explanation, that is fully up to whomever is interested in filling out the self-assessment. So the second part is the online manual. And here we have to take a step back, because I said earlier that we try to reduce the due diligence process to its essence. For us, this essence is three dimensions. So one is understanding risk. The second one is preventing, reducing, and where necessary, remediating risk. And the third one is integrating due diligence in company policies and processes. So each of these sets of processes comes with sub-processes. So I won't go into detail here. Please have a look at it on the website. The thing is here that these sub-processes and these three dimensions form the basis of the manual. And the idea is that as you move through the manual, you complete these different components or sections, whatever you want to call it, and you mark these as complete. And in that way, there is a more or less, but not entirely sequential approach that you can follow. And in the end of, at the end of the process, the idea is that you have a very basic due diligence strategy that is attuned to the realities of your company. So what else? I mean, these are two screenshots of the actual text. What we do, for instance, is rather than putting everything in the body text, we use drop-down menus with practical examples, for instance, with exercises, in this case for developing a supplier self-assessment. We also, and of course, it's obvious if you develop a toolkit that there's a number of tools that you can use. For instance, we have a Word template for a basic due diligence strategy that basically summarizes the results of your exercises that you do throughout the toolbox. We have an Excel sheet that can help you to identify and to inventory risks at the level of particular products as well as particular suppliers. There's a list with relevant tools and guidelines and templates and so forth that you can consult in case you want to move beyond what is in the actual toolbox. And then finally, as the minister already mentioned, we also organized learning networks together with Sustenuto. And one of the outputs of the learning network is a set of guidelines, because the toolbox in itself is not sector specific. So it contains certain sector specific examples, but we, in line with the call initially, we had to sort of remain generic and not give sector-specific tools and guidance. So what we do here in two sectors. So the first one is the food industry. We developed a set of guidelines that can further facilitate the use of the toolbox by companies in the food industry, for instance, because we offer an overview of important risks in the industry, as well as existing initiatives to engage with those risks. A second guideline for the technology industry is currently underway. So I think that's an overview of the most important tools and elements that are in the toolbox. The website, yeah, duediligence.be was already taken. I don't know by whom, but it's already taken. So it's become duediligencetoolbox.be. I invite all of you to visit the website. And then finally, just a brief word of thanks, because I have spent quite some time working on this together with my partners. So first of all, thank you to the FIDO and the Cabinet of Minister Katabi for putting their trust in us, to Static, especially Annelies and Anton. You were extremely professional and creative in helping us to develop the online platform. Adelphi, especially Bibiana, thank you for strengthening the environmental side of the story and also being a valuable sparring partner. And then finally, the Shift, of course, for giving very valuable feedback, but also for facilitating the dissemination of this toolbox. So thank you all, and also, of course, the audience for being here. I hope you will have inspiring next talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris, and thank you for the amazing work that you've done, of course, together with all the partners. I've had a chance to go through the tool already, and it's indeed very well thought and complete and very practice oriented. So I truly recommend you to start using it just after this webinar is over. Now we will see what's happening outside of borders and go to the Netherlands, where they also have been developing some very complementary tools, actually. And we have Silke de Jong from MVO Netherlands, which is a network of enterprise committing to sustainability. And Silke, over to you to present us a bit what is happening in the Netherlands and the CSR risk checker in particular.
Yes, thank you, Brie. You can see my screen now, right? Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. My name is Silke indeed, and why am I here? I'm actually doing, I'm working at MVO Nederland. It's quite similar to the Shift, actually. We call ourselves a movement for new economy entrepreneurs, and that includes climate neutral, inclusive, circular, but also these fair supply chains that we've been talking about last half an hour. And for me, I'm mostly focused on these fair supply chains. And we do this in themed and sector networks, in innovative projects, but we also offer some tools. And that's actually what I want to share with you today. Yes, first of all, we have the MVO risk check tool. I will focus mostly on that. But we also offer a whole lot besides that, of course. So I will also try to shortly dive into this short 10 minutes. So we have the CSR risk check tool, and actually it's aimed for companies, specifically SMEs, but also, of course, larger companies can use it. It's free of use, and you can see the website right here. If you press start to check, you will go to this page and you select a certain product or service that you're that you offer. So in this case, I selected the cereals, and you can select the country of origin. And with this two entries, you actually get with one press on the button, you get this fairly extensive report of risks that you can encounter. And they are specific for the country you entered and the product you entered. Sometimes only country specific and sometimes only product specific, but ideally both. And they are linked to some advices, as you can see here below. And we get at these risks amongst all 22 CSR teams that we use at MVO Nederland. So you have the fair business practices side, the human and ethics side, but also the environmental risk that you can encounter as a company. And we started this 10 years ago, and in a way I would say it's quite a challenge. It's financed by our Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and since a couple of years also the German Agency for Business and Economic Development joined to actually be able to also launch the German version of the tool. So for now it's available in Dutch, German and English, and as I said, it's free of use. We use online open sources for this. So we have knowledge from over 3,000 open sources we've gathered in the last 10 years, and they're updated every 5 years. And with that, we now have over 6,000 risks and advices. We all link to a specific product, country, and a specific team. And it really helps giving you this first overview of what are the specific risks that we can encounter. And we really see in the last couple of years that the demand for it is growing, which is great. And we also really see the high rise now. The national regulations are coming up. So in a way, I would say that's an optimistic scenario. But of course, seeing all these risks, it can also be a bit scary. So we've created some practical guidelines as well. This 9-step approach based on the USO guidelines, but really practical in, okay, now I know I've seen all these risks. How do I know where to start? How do I prioritize? How do I know what my level of affliction is in this problem? And how can I also determine my plan of action based on that? But also, how do I change the behavior of a supplier? Because it's not something that I do, that I have to change. And how can you manage that? We uploaded it last month and we had some 90 downloads this far. So I do feel that there's a lot of need for tools like this, just like the tool you just presented, Boris. Then shortly, we've offered some financial support as well. They were based on the MVO vouchers. We did that for 14 years now, together with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well. There's a big demand, I would say. This year we helped 45 entrepreneurs as well. But unfortunately, it will be the last year we offered this based on due to the new regulations that are coming up. But I do feel that you also need some money to actually dive into some of the really specific problems you encounter in your supply chain. Luckily, this did free up some money to actually also launch the CSR help desk last month here in the Netherlands. We already see the CSR help desk or the German help desk. It was launched a while ago, and it's quite popular. I think the positive thing about this is that we really have some time to do some one-on-one advice, specific cases, because I do feel that these guidelines are very broad and every case is quite specific. Also requested by the Dutch government again and executed by the Dutch Enterprise Agency. And we are linked as an expert panel on this this help desk. And I think I also heard Boris say something about this, that like the shared learning. We also do that in the Netherlands with community of practices, quite popular amongst the bigger companies, just to really facilitate a shared learning space in which challenges do you face, which steps can we take together for the CSRD, but also for the CSRDDD. We want to apply things like that. So that's really short, I would say, in a nutshell, the toolbox we've got in the Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silke. That was very clear. And I've seen Reinhard, you were nodding when Silke mentioned the support from Germany, and we will see that in 10 minutes how we can join force across Europe, and it's already happening, and that's great for the conception of the tool that Boris presented, but also for the CSRS check, etc. So, but before that, let's find out about this new tool that Fairtrade is about to release. So, Cécile Henrard, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. For those who wouldn't know me, I am Cécile Henrard, Head of Business Development at Fairtrade Belgium. So I'm very happy today to be able to show you our Fairtrade risk map, but I thought it would be a very good idea to introduce very shortly what Fairtrade does, because I think that everyone knows our label, but it's maybe not always clear what's behind the label. So I will very shortly present ourselves. So we are a global system with 25 national Fairtrade organizations like Fairtrade Belgium, who are really working with companies to have them aboard the Fairtrade story. And we have also 3 producer networks in the south who are going to support those almost 2 million producers and workers we are supporting within the Fairtrade system. So we really have a very strong presence on the field in the south. And we currently work with more than 2,500 companies who have generated more than 190,000 million euros premium. And I will come back on this Fairtrade premium in a couple of minutes. So the Fairtrade principle, I will not go through all of them, but I will focus myself on the 2 on the left, on the right. It's the Fairtrade minimum price and the just mentioned Fairtrade premium. So we are a strong label based on planet, people, but also on prosperity. It's very important for us to offer a system to producers where they can earn a decent living. And this Fairtrade minimum price is really a strong safety net for producers. When the market prices of commodities go down, they have the certainty to at least have this Fairtrade minimum price. And this Fairtrade minimum price goes to the producer. Then you have the Fairtrade fixed premium. This is an additional amount that is paid and that stays at the level of the cooperative, because we really want to empower cooperatives, so we give them the freedom to spend this premium in projects for the cooperative or within the community around the cooperative. And this premium is spent, the decision on spending this premium is made democratically. This means that the people that are in the cooperative, they can give their meaning and say, I want to vote for this or that. So this makes it very strong because it empowers the farmers. So as I said, So we are a label, we have standards that companies and producers have to comply to. And those standards are built on 3 pillars. The prosperity one I just mentioned. We have a very important people one. And I would like to point out that we also are strongly working on the planet pillar. So it's very important for us to also work on the environmental criteria, because we see, and then it's linked with the prosperity, that when people are in extreme poverty, they are going to harm the planet because they have to go do deforestation. They are not going to manage water quite well. So this is also a strong pillar next to people and prosperity. Then the fair trade risk map, that's the subject of today. So it's a tool that is developed by Fairtrade, and the aim of this tool is to accompany bottom-up HREDD processes, and they represent our understanding of the salient human rights and environmental issue in the supply chains and the geographies where we work. I will show you this later on. It was developed because obviously and unfortunately human rights and environmental risk and harms are widespread in global supply chain. And then I have to be totally honest with you, it's a first sneak peek because the tool, the official launch of the tool is postponed for a couple of weeks. It should be, the official launch should happen in December or January. And why is that? We are an organization which values a lot the meaning and the meaning of the producers, and we wait for final validation of the producer network because we want to make sure that this tool represents their input. So we have to be a little bit patient and wait a couple of weeks, but then we will be able to present you to officially launch this fair trade risk map. So how will it look like? It will look like this. It's an online tool with a map that communicates data on human rights and the environment, specific to the most common commodities certified by Fairtrade and obviously the countries where Fairtrade operates. It actually lists the most serious human rights and environmental risk prevalent in these commodities and countries, and describes what Fairtrade does to address these risks and their root causes. So it actually positions Fairtrade clearly as a partner for the due diligence process. And it shows also how Fairtrade certification, producer support, tailored programs, and other intervention mitigate the risks. So this map is the product of Fairtrade's ongoing risk and impact assessment work, which is unique in bringing together external data, direct input from Fairtrade farmers and workers. Again, we work really strongly with them. Fairtrade staff from 6 continents and external experts. So about the map, so the aim of the risk map is to accompany companies and producers' organizations to assess their human rights and environmental risk and develop their due diligence processes. So proper risk management, proper risk assessment is crucial for further actions by company to prevent, mitigate, and remediate harms. So Fairtrade, we really want to provide a well-documented basis for further work on human rights and the environment. So the map is therefore also a tool to call on companies in supply chains to cooperate and co-invest in the mitigation, prevention, and remediation of the salient risk and their root causes. And I was saying before that this risk map is there to accompany companies and producer organizations, because it's not only manufacturing companies who have to work on the due diligence process, it's also workers and producers organization. They also have to do this risk assessment, so they can also use the Fairtrade risk map to help them even at the first step of the supply chain. So the risk and root causes in the map are not specific to Fairtrade certified supply chain. There are actually challenges that all farmers, workers, communities, and companies face in these countries and in specific commodities. It is in fact because of these challenges that fair trade was created and that we continue to be a useful partner for companies and producer organizations. Then you can have the exercise on commodity level. So you will be able to find the salient risk and root causes for human rights violations and negative impacts on the environment related to specific commodities. So we will, in the end, so by the summer 2023, we will cover all 17, so 17 commodities Fairtrade is working on. We currently have 4 commodities ready, and by January, we will also have cocoa, which is quite an important commodity on the Belgian market, because with Beyond Chocolate, we see more and more companies willing to work with Fairtrade. So this is an example of banana. So this is the commodity part where you can see which salient human rights and environmental issues occur in the banana production. This is the green or yellow box that you see. And then you can see what are the root causes, and you can also find some important data, in this case on banana production worldwide and about Fairtrade in particular. And then in the root cause section above right, you can also click on this blue box and you get deeper information. There are different levels in this on this page. So that's the commodity section. And then you have exactly the same exercise on country level, where you can find the salient risk and root causes for human rights violation and negative environmental impacts. In total, there are 129 countries covered. This means that you can find countries in the south, but also countries in the north. So if you want to look up for Belgium and understand what's the problematic in Belgium, you will also be able to find this. Here is an example of Ghana, a well-known country for cocoa, for example. You see here on the right the most salient issues indicated for this country, and this is all based on data collected on 26 human rights and environmental indicators, including the poverty index, the global rights index, gender inequality index, and many more. So it's really a very fine analysis of the country problematics. And then there is also an issue section where you will find information about the 9 salient issues that are considered for the risk map. And this includes, for example, living income or living wage, child rights, gender rights, climate change, non-discrimination, etc. So for each of these issues, you will find more detailed information on how Fairtrade is trying to address them through preventive and mitigating measures, as well as remediating measures, as you can see in this example for living income, for instance. And you can also have a more detailed overview of the preventive and mitigating measures that Fairtrade can work on with business partners to work on the specific salient issues of living income, for example. But it must be very clear that the due diligence process is the responsibility of companies, and that even if Fairtrade offers important services for companies to accompany them in their due diligence efforts, it remains their responsibility to conduct due diligence process.
Sorry, Cecile, you're on mute, it seems.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I hear some background noise. So yeah, thank you. So I will get back to this slide. So I was saying that I have a couple of additional points I want to share with you, because this might anticipate some of the questions you already have. So this map is different from other tools since its content was validated by fair trade farmers and workers. And as I said in the beginning, it's also a reason why we are going to delay for a couple of weeks the official launch of this fair trade risk map. But this makes it also very strong because it is done with and for, with and by the fair trade farmers and workers. But not only, we have a lot of literature reviews from external experts. There is a lot of fair trade internal knowledge, so it makes it very strong. Then next to that, the map was made according to the OECD due diligence guidance by undertaking first a scoping of all human rights and environmental issues, a more in-depth assessment of high-risk areas and issues, and extensive engagement with impacted stakeholders. We plan, obviously, we plan updates in the years because the situations evolve with time. Also to be very clear, the entire map will not be available for free. Only part of this map will be available. But for our fair trade partners, we will have access to more in-depth information so that we can help them in this whole process. And at Fairtrade, we have now a center of excellence about HREDD based in Finland. So this group of people will be able to continue working on the risk map and make sure that this is a very useful tool for companies that want to partner with Fairtrade in their due diligence efforts. So once again, the official launch will happen in December or January 23 with 5 commodities, including bananas and cocoa. And by the summer of next year, we will cover the 17 commodities we are working on. So this is our fair trade risk map. Very happy to discuss it further. If you have any interest, please get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cécile, and thank you for still accepting to present the tool, even though it wasn't actually ready for today. But you all know that it's going to be released soon. So now up to you, Renard. So we have seen that there's different tools and are being developed in different countries across Europe, and you, of course, have 2 roles here. You're working for the German ministry, but also you're working with other colleagues across Europe to see how you can put together those tools and make them maybe available in other countries and make sure that they are complementaries, but also develop some measures to support enterprise across Europe in aligning with the upcoming legislation. So up to you.
Many thanks, Brooke, and many thanks to Shift for this invitation and to get the opportunity to demonstrate a little bit what we are working on. Many thanks also to Boris, Silke, and Cécile for your presentations. It shows already that there are many tools out there, and it also gives a slight idea of a certain need to coordinate or to group all these instruments so that companies and stakeholders find their way and the right instruments. And this is also why we from the German government we decided to try to launch an initiative on the EU level to coordinate EU member states' support measures for the implementation of due diligence requirements, and to get also into a dialogue with you, the practitioners, so that we can adopt our offer to the demands that you have, companies and stakeholders out there along the global supply chain. So why me from the BMZ, the German Ministry for Development Cooperation, I'm presenting you this? Well, in essence, due diligence legislation is about improving working conditions in partner countries, in developing countries and emerging countries. And therefore, this legislation on due diligence is an important lever for us as development cooperation actors. And this is also why, for example, in Germany, it was my Minister for Development Cooperation who pushed for due diligence legislation and initiated our legislative process. It is important for us as development actors that we want to have ambitious regulation that works on the ground. But of course, we don't want that companies withdraw from developing markets because they fear that it is too risky to operate in sectors where the risk of human rights violation is big, and so that they withdraw from developing markets, and so this has a negative impact on our partner countries who need our investments, our techniques, and our support. So for this reason, BMZ has already promoted the principle of empowerment before withdrawal and started to set up support measures early on. I give you 4 examples of support measures that we are promoting and that we want to embed also in a European approach, so that you get an idea of what kind of support measures we are talking about here. First of all, also we in Germany, we have got a German help desk that is mandated, first of all, to support German companies to find their way in the due diligence process. But let me say that many of the instruments that we are providing, they're also available in English. So feel free to check out if you can also use this for your risk management processes. Our help desk provides many online tools for education and training, but it also gives individual advice for companies and organizes information events for business associations that we regard as a very important multiplicators to reach out to the companies who need to adopt their management. Well, Boris just mentioned, we have launched the SME Compass in particular. That is an instrument that guides, first of all, small and medium-sized enterprises, how to tackle due diligence management. And since the latest, we've also launched another instrument. It's called the Standards Compass that gives business orientation in the jungle, if I may say so, of standards and certificates. Also available in English, so check this out, Standards Compass. Also a very interesting support tool that may be in your interest. Second, we've launched a technical assistance program called Initiative Global Solidarity. The personnel of this program swarms out to partner countries, helps to set up help desks also in partner countries with a local business association. It helps to set up in partner countries grievance mechanisms, for example, sector-wide grievance mechanisms, also to support our companies to fulfill their due diligence requirements. But it also supports online solutions for more transparency. Have a look, for example, at our Open Supply Hub, an online tool that helps to screen factories along the supply chain with regard to their due diligence commitment. This is a very new instrument launched only 1 month ago. So feel free to check this out too. Our third measure that I wanted to present is a fund that our development bank, the KfW, has set up. It's a fund called ESG First. It gives loans to small and medium-sized enterprises in partner countries to increase, first of all, their businesses. But the credit is also accompanied with consulting to improve ESG management so that the companies in our partner countries get fit for due diligence requirements and can stay in the supply chain of European companies. Fourth message that I wanted to present to you is our program Partnerships 2030. It's a partnership supposed to support multi-stakeholder initiatives. And here special attention is given to the participation and the capacity building of civil society actors in such multi-stakeholder initiatives. We consider this very important. I'll come back to this later on. Well, we've already done a lot, but we quickly noticed we can't support in all sectors and in all countries. And this is why we as a German government, we launched an EU-wide initiative to coordinate support measures on EU level to prepare all the stakeholders, companies and civil society for the implementation of the upcoming EU legislation, CSDDD. We need to team up and we need to organize some sort of division of labor. And so we This is why we came up with this Team Europe initiative on sustainability in global supply chains. Well, this initiative is not a closed shop. It's an open group of member states. Up to now, 8 member states are participating in this initiative together with the EU Commission, and but all the other member states are invited to join in. We will see in how far this will develop. But we suppose that interest will increase with the upcoming EU legislation. The first step of this initiative was that we, as a Commission and the member states, we did a mapping of all the existing supporting measures to see what is already out there, and also to identify the gaps where we maybe need to join forces and set up new instruments in order to present comprehensive support structure. The first result of this mapping is that there are already so many different measures out there. There's so many that it is difficult to get an overview and to identify the right ones for the individual demands of a company or a stakeholder group. For example, the federal government provides around about 60 different measures with a total volume of around about 500 million euro. The Netherlands, for example, they also have gathered, I think it was 34 measures that are supporting due diligence implementation along the global supply chain. And together with the Commission and what all the other member states have reported so far, we reached round about 1 billion euro of supporting measures. Just to say that we are not only setting up new routes, but we're also setting up a whole set of supporting measures to help all the stakeholders to implement the upcoming regulation. So as it is so difficult to get an overview and to see what is best for my demand, we come up with the idea to set up an EU-wide help desk. This help desk should have mainly 2 functions. First, provide information about the legal requirements from EU level, especially for companies in third countries. It makes no sense that every single member state provides such information for third countries. Duplication would be inevitable, and so we think it's a good idea to do this on the EU level and to inform, let's say, with one voice. But second, the second function of this help desk should be to inform then also the stakeholders about the different support measures that member states are providing together with the EU Commission. Gather all the informations and the measures already available, work them up for the users, and put them then, let's say, into the shop window so that all the stakeholder groups can find the right instruments for their support. The formula that we're working on is a one-stop shop with 3 entrances. One entrance would be for companies, mainly from partner countries, but also for EU companies, so that they can see what is demanded from them, but also to see what support measures are in place for them. Second entrance is supposed to be for right holders and civil society, to inform them about their rights and also their possibilities. And then we think about a third entrance for multi-stakeholder initiative, because we expect that multi-stakeholder initiatives will play a very important role in implementation of EU regulation, especially in the sector-specific interpretation of the abstract requirements from the bill, identification of the relevant risks, prioritization of those risks in a specific sector, definition of the right mitigation measures, and the joint implementation of those mitigation measures, or for example, of grievance mechanism. We think multi-stakeholder initiatives can play a very important role in this, and so they deserve a special attention also in this help desk. Well, the idea for the technical setup of this help desk is the following. We would like to start with setting up an online platform, set up a new structure, but using also already existing instruments and online tools, let's say, to communalize them. This applies in particular to online tools such as the risk checker that Silke just presented, or also our German SME compass that we are all willing to put on the European level so that all the other member states and stakeholders can also profit from it, and make it available also in other languages, perhaps also, for example, in France, so that small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe and abroad can also use those instruments that are up to now perhaps only available in a few languages. Second, we would also like to have a personal expansion then of this help desk in order to enable it to offer tailor-made offers for companies and associations, give individual advice, and reach out to business associations to inform stakeholders about the legislation and the support structures that are in place. Well, the level of ambition and the personal expansion depends, of course, on the financial commitment of member states. So if you have the feeling that you're on the right track here, feel invited to appeal to your government for participating and financing. And so we are optimistic that we can set up something comprehensive that is also very helpful for all the stakeholders to implement due diligence legislation once it is in place. Many thanks, Brooke. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Reinhard. And indeed, we can't stress even more the importance of teaming up across Europe, but above all with third countries to make sure that they don't end up being more impacted from the legislation. Okay, so thanks to all the speakers. Now we will see if there are some questions in the audience. And if you have questions, please ask them in the Q&A module. In the meantime, if you want to pitch the tool or the support that your organization is providing to others, please let us know in the chat that you want to present. We'll give you 2 minutes of video voice to explain a bit what it consists of, or you can just describe and give the link in the chat. That's also possible. But also, if your company is facing actually challenge, and we've seen that in the beginning, that already some challenge and difficulties have been mentioned, please share that in the chat as well, or let us know, and we'll give you the voice to explain that in also 2 minutes. So now, starting with questions. We'll go through the chat. I don't see so far any in the Q&A module. So you haven't listened to me and you've all written your questions in the chat, but that's all right. Let me start. Okay. Here I see a question from Eva Verbist. I hear a lot of facilitation mechanism for SMEs and companies, help desk, etc. Is there also a direct help desk, complaint desk for producers or producer organizations? That's probably for you, Renat.
Could you repeat this question, please? I didn't got it.
So I hear, so the person say, I hear a lot of facilitation mechanism for SMEs and companies, help desk, etc. Is there also a direct help desk, complaints desk for producers and producer organizations?
Yeah, well, we as federal government, we are organizing also help desks in partner countries at local business associations to support them in understanding what legal requirements and due diligence is about. And we often also have technical assistance for companies from producing countries to meet up their expectations. That is for the companies. Now I hear about complaining. Complaining is something that should be organized in grievance mechanisms. And there's also going on a lot. I haven't mentioned this, but of course, the federal government, but also many other governments in Europe, they are facilitating and supporting sector-specific approaches. For example, in extractive industry, in the cacao sector, in the coffee sector, in agricultural sector in general. But this is sector-specific. There are also multi-stakeholder initiatives in place, and they're also organizing sector-wide grievance mechanisms already in some sectors. And I presume that once EU legislation is coming into force, this legislation will also be a booster for many more multi-stakeholder initiatives to organize such cooperation. And we as a federal government, we think that it makes absolute sense that such grievance mechanisms are organized sector-wide, so that it's easier to promote, and it's easier also to organize and organize it in a way that not every single company needs to invest in order to set up such grievance mechanism structures, but that they can join forces and do it together. And this is also more economic. I hope that replies somehow to the question that has been raised.
Yes, thank you, Reinhard. Boris, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just a short addition. I think the question that is raised here refers specifically also to the question about producers and producer organization, because of course often grievance mechanisms will think about workers, which is local communities, which is of course very important. But at the same time, I would say one of the key concerns and the key challenges for implementing actual due diligence will be the impact on suppliers and the extent to which suppliers, SMEs, producers are able to deal with certain requirements. And the way in which we collect feedback from smaller companies, from producers, will be very important, I think, in order to have a successful implementation of due diligence. So one of the things is also that we should think about indeed trying to ensure that these companies, first of all, have the necessary information. So for instance, smallholder in, let's say, Tanzania, that they have access to the necessary information, but also that we listen to how they experience the imposition of, because often it is imposition of certain requirements on your supply chain, how they experience this and whether it actually works for them. So I think that is also something to bear in mind. And that is a question that I think, again, is something that we can and should tackle at the level of Europe rather than individual member states.
Thank you, Boris. Cécile, you want to add something or ask a question?
Yes, please. I wanted to add something to the question of Eva about the complaint desk for producers and producer organization. To give an example, at Fairtrade, I mentioned that we have these producer networks in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. The producers, they can contact these producer networks when they have problematics. We really have a very close contact with them. We have this WhatsApp number that they can reach, where they can address those issues and be supported by Fairtrade. So this is an example of how we work in, if we can call it a complaint desk, but they have a sounding board that they can discuss issues with us.
There is comment for you, Boris, as well in the chat. Luc Hendricks is saying that he misses a link. Sorry, it's moving. He misses in the Belgian tool a link. Sorry, he misses in the Belgian tool a link to a real database as in the MVO tool. Why?
Yeah, I was actually typing an answer. I mean, the short answer is because it already exists. And the second part of the answer is that actually in the database, so what we have in the database is a couple of, I mean, we have examples, but we also have, I mean, exercises is not the right word because it's not an exercise. It's certain tasks that companies have to fulfill. And what we have done is we have included an Excel template, and in that Excel template, I mean, it's one thing you should download at the start of the manual. In that Excel template is also a list with all relevant templates, tools, guidelines, and so forth. And for instance, the CSR check is there, but also, of course, SME Compass, a lot of the tools that are being mentioned here and that Reinhard mentioned. Of course, I see that, for instance, the Standards Compass is now online. So I should update it, but of course it hasn't happened right now. So there is quite a lot of reference to existing tools in the database, in the toolbox, precisely because we don't want to reinvent everything.
And another one for you. No, that's for Silke, sorry. Did I understood well that the data in the MVO tool are only reviewed each 5 years?
Yes, thank you. Yes, well, the data is actually reviewed every day, every week. We're working on it continuously. However, indeed, we add new risk, new sources, but once, after 5 years, we will make sure that all the sources are actually renewed. There's, of course, some periodic sources that we renew every year, and like that, we actually approach this. Our big database and keeping it up to date.
Okay. Thanks. Another question for you, Reinhard. How would, and apparently there is a problem with the Q&A, so you're all excused for not using the Q&A. So Reinhard, how would an EU help desk work in practice? Would they be having all relevant info, including on national legislations themselves, or would they serve rather as a portal to the relevant national bodies? What format would you suggest for such a help desk? For example, commission-led.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we're about to elaborate the concept now. I said that the basic line is we want to have an online platform as an help desk in order to gather many online tools that are already out there and then bundle them somehow and then communitize it. Or, for example, if you have one instrument that's only available in French, then it may be also available in English and vice versa. To inform as many stakeholders as possible. It's not yet sure how we are going to organize this and how to finance it. We will have a workshop on this between Member States and the EU Commission in December, and then we'll go into the details. But the basic idea is that is an online tool, and then we will try to increase the help desk and build up more capacity also with personnel to give individual advice. And then we think it would be very important that these additional people, they go especially into the business associations of member states to have to inform companies about the legislation and the support measures in place. But we will have a focus on supporting and informing businesses in third countries, because some member states already have national help desks that are mandated to inform their national companies. But of course, not all member states will be able to set up their own help desk. And so we will try to figure out in how far also the services provided, first of all, for third countries are also available for companies in European member states. I have to say that this is an initiative based, let's say, in the sector of development cooperation. But beside this, we are also coordinating with colleagues from DG GROW, the economic part of the EU Commission. They're also setting up support measures and information, but in a broader context of the Green Deal. They will also have some sort of a one-stop shop in order to inform European companies especially. And we will have a situation where we will have two information platforms. This one I was referring to will focus more on the external dimension, third countries, but there's so many instruments that we already have. They inform all the stakeholders. Yeah, if you have an online video, what are the UN guiding principles? You can use this to inform stakeholders from third countries, but it's also interesting, of course, for stakeholders in Europe, and this is why we are coming up with this idea of having one platform with different entrances, so that we can organize the offer tailor-made to the different stakeholder groups.
Thank you. And stay there because there was another question for you. There's people asking for the list of tools that you actually mentioned. So if you can send that after, we'll share that with all the participants, of course. And I think there was another one.
There's a hand raised as well, Brio.
There's a hand raised, yes. There's Christina. We'll give her Christina up. You can ask a question. Normally, you now have access.
Jump in. Great. Sorry, my chat function's not working, so I raised my hand. Pardon if it was out of line. But I just had a question for Reinhard about the German government's recent initiative on the innovative financing for peace and whether or not that has any correlation to the sets of tools that you shared. And then I have a general question for the speakers about the topic of gender, whether or not gender sensitivity and gender mainstreaming was taken into consideration in the formulation of the toolkits, and especially with regards to data collection. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for this question. Initiative for Peace, financing instruments. I have to say, I don't know that one. So I presume the answer to my question, to your question, is there's no link yet. At least I don't see it yet.
And Christina, maybe can you repeat the second part of your questions? It was addressed to the other speakers, but is there anyone in particular? Or?
Sure. No, just to all of the speakers, whether or not they've taken gender sensitivity and gender mainstreaming perspectives into consideration. And also, Reinhard, just so you know that the German government has a feasibility study on the innovative financing for peace effort. So it could be of interest.
Okay. Thank you for this tip. Well, I can say that, of course, we in the German, my new minister, she's very engaged in organizing some sort of feministic development cooperation. So we are also, of course, very gender sensitive and consider due diligence legislation also as an instrument to support gender equality. There are different ILO conventions in our legislation that are in favor of gender equality. And then, of course, we've got also this dimension of living wages. There's also a dimension of equal pay. So this is also, so we consider due diligence legislation also as a very important instrument for gender equality. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you, Renat. I saw that there's Thibaut from Ricolto who wanted to present something that they have used or developed. Thibaut, I have just made you a presenter, so you are free to switch on your camera. There you go.
Hi, thank you, Bria. Let me find. I just during what I said translated some slides. So very briefly. We use inclusive business as a framework, as a tool to look at business relationships. And I think this might be complementary to what I said today because it dives deeper into a specific chain and it includes all the chain actors. Because I think we want to prevent that human rights and due diligence or human rights and environmental due diligence is a let's say a list of criteria that is pushed down the value chain, but rather is tackled with all the actors together. And I think this tool can help companies and cooperatives we work mainly in the food sector. So when I talk about cooperatives, I mean producer companies, cooperatives. We use this tool and it follows 6 principles to set up new value chains or evaluate and improve existing value chains. These are the principles: chain-wide collaboration, effective market linkages, fairness and transparency, equitable access to services, inclusive innovation, and measurement of units. These are, let's say, good practices, good reflexes to have, or things to think about when you sit together at the table with with all the chain actors. And behind every principle, there's certain methods or questions. and we asked them to the different partners or the different actors in the value chain. And we, after assessing this, we put this together in this diagram. And here you, for example, you see where the seller and the buyer say the same, something else. They have a different understanding of what is an effective market linkage, or how they share risk, or other elements of this of the supply chain. And that's the basic or the basis to go again to the table and talk about, okay, how can we tackle this together? Where do we need improving? What is not important? What is important to us? Voila, and I think this is a very good framework to use when you have your risks or your risk assessment, and then you want to dive deeper into the specific value chains that you want to change or make risk averse. Yeah. Sorry, I'm very short, very unprepared, but I hope it was somehow insightful and useful for the people here.
It is, and we challenge you to be short, so it's also our responsibility. But I've had the chance to get a presentation of this tool, a longer presentation, and it was indeed very interesting and can be super useful. Boris, you want to raise a point?
Yeah, just very briefly, because we get a reaction, and I think it's a valid statement that a lot of the existing tools and guidelines are not always very accessible for SMEs. And I think I just want to explain that part of the tension, I think, lies in the way in which international norms and guidelines have been formulated, OECD guidance, UNGPs, the way they have been translated into legislation on the one hand, and then the realities for many SMEs on the other hand. And navigating this complexity when you develop tools is quite a delicate balancing exercise, I must say, because you have to, I mean, not make certain choices, but when you really try to adhere to all of which is being said in the guidelines, then of course it becomes quite a lot and quite elaborate. And I think trying to navigate that complexity and trying to make sure that companies have something that is achievable, but at the same time effective and in line with standards is quite tricky. So it's it's a question of trial and error, I guess.
Progress in the making. All right, thank you. Does anyone else wants to step in? I don't see any more comments, so I think it's good opportunity to conclude here. So thank you a lot to all the presenters. It was very super interesting to see that those tools are existing. Sorry, tools, but don't forget, tools are just tools. They are there to help, not to do the work for you. Use them to make your value chain more sustainable, not only to avoid risk for your company. This implies working hand in hand with actors in your value chain. Just to inform you, we're organizing a hackathon on coffee with all the actors involved in the coffee value chain on December 1st. This is an activity limited for 24 people. But if you are active in the coffee value chain, please let us know, and we'll consider your participation. We are also preparing the program for next year, and we want to be as action-oriented as possible. So if this is why it's very important for us to know what are your needs, so that we can adapt the activities accordingly. So thank you for all your comments. It's very rich, good feedback, and thank you for your question. We will take that into account as we prepare the program. And thank you so much for all the presenters today, for all the speakers. It was super complimentary and very great. So thank you. And to all of you, please fill in the survey as you leave. We just want to take 20 seconds of your time to get a feedback on the webinar. Thank you, all of you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.